Mr. Curry, can you tell us a little bit, I mean, just what's gone through your head when you heard this? You have a son on campus there.
I do. I was actually just pulled in to have lunch at a restaurant, and my wife sent me a text that had the alert of an active shooter, and she let me know she couldn't get a hold of our son. She was trying to reach him via his phone, text messaging. Fortunately, when he was in middle school, I joined him on Snapchat because he's pretty quick on that, and I messaged him, and he got back to me right away and let me know that he was hunkered down in his apartment. Obviously, nightmare, not knowing what's happening, having a student on campus. And now I'm just sitting watching, wondering what's happening, and can't imagine what parents and families that either are victims or those that don't know even where their children are right now and heard from them.
Yeah, we're so glad that your son, that you heard from him, that you were able to find that alternate way to hear from him, because that's a part of sometimes what happens in the chaos. So many people are trying to call out if they even have their phones. And Mayor Curry, I know you were in office in the aftermath of that 2014 shooting, and so fast forwarding a decade later, and to know that that community has experienced this again, what is your message to the FSU family and those in Tallahassee?
It's inexplicable that this is the kind of stuff that happens. I really don't have words, except that cannot even imagine what the families are going through. It's just pure evil. It's inexplicable. And it's a terrible way to be reminded how fragile life is.
And when you were talking to your son, I mean, did he give you any idea? I can only imagine how heavy the feeling is on and around campus and with his friends. I mean, did he give you any idea of what the, I don't want to say vibe, that feels too casual of a term, but what the scene feels like right now out there?
It kind of felt like he was in shock. He's a big guy, he's a tough guy, but he acknowledged he's in his apartment on lockdown, and he still was telling me he's still scared. So he's in a safe place, and so I can't imagine the students that were in the student union, that were around it, that were running. I mean, just so I heard you guys talking about the mental health aspect of this. I mean, this is just a tragedy, and it's one thing we've seen this stuff play out on the news and television over the years. It's when it's somewhat close to you, and when I say close to me, I simply have a kid there that is safe, but it got really real really fast.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about that moment? Your wife, former First Lady Molly Curry, she reaches out to you, can't get in touch with her son, and you finally hear from him and you can confirm that he's safe. Tell me about that moment you were able to call Molly and give her the news that you had made contact.
It's from extreme thinking of the worst. So elevated adrenaline, everything, fear, to, oh my God. He's not only is he safe, he's in his apartment. He's not even on campus right now.
Well, I'm just glad.
But I step back and I think, I mean, first thing our families, right? That's where we go. But now my son's safe, and because we're so close to this university, I can't imagine what the victims, their families are going through, and families that haven't heard from their children.
Yeah.
And when you've been on campus out there, I mean, what is that part of campus, especially midday? I mean, I imagine that it's just full of people. What does that look like?
Oh, it's hustling, it's bustling. I will tell you that you reminded me, the first message my son sent me back was, he said, it's crazy right now. Active shooter on campus. Shots are flying everywhere.
Those words you never want to
so
hear
I
out of your
haven't-
kid's mouth.
I don't know if he heard the shots or if he's getting that from his friends, but that was his message to me.
Again, we are grateful that you were able to make contact and that your son is safe in his apartment, and we can just obviously hear your sympathy for those families who haven't heard or who may get some very upsetting news, for those faculty members and all those impacted as we now wait to get answers. You mentioned earlier that this is really inexplicable, but hopefully we'll get more insight from law enforcement as to why something like this would happen. Especially, students are winding down the semester, they're getting ready for the Easter holiday weekend. And for something like this to happen, especially during the height of lunch hours, this is just so unfortunate and so
Terrible.
tragic.
We live in a broken world,
Well,
and we should all try to be the good in it.
absolutely. Thank you so much. We so appreciate your time, and we're so glad that your family is safe and well, and we are obviously sending prayers to those who are otherwise
Yeah.
still
Thank
wondering.
you.
Yeah, we hope to check back in with you later just to make sure, just see how your son is doing, because as you mentioned, this is a lot to process, and hopefully all of his friends and his loved ones there on campus are also safe. Thank you so much, Mr. Curry.
Prayers for all the families and gratitude to the law enforcement,
Absolutely.
Yes.
first
Thank you.
responders.
And we are getting new information, new sound from students from the FSU campus just into our newsroom here at 3:06. Let's listen into what they had to say.
About 15 seconds before the actual shooting happened, a bunch of kids started running around screaming, and we're just like, oh, what's going on? And then probably maybe 10 gunshots happened, and everyone's like, oh my God.
I just hear gunshots, and I was like, oh, that's weird, but I didn't realize like how close they were. And I hear more, it was like 5 gunshots in a row, and everybody got up, looked at each other, and just started running.
I just tried to remain calm the entire time. It was kind of surreal what was happening. I didn't really think I'd ever be in a situation like this. You know, you always see this kind of stuff on the news, and you'd be like, how are things like this continue to be allowed and continue to happen? But I never thought I'd be in a classroom in the same kind of scenario.
People were going everywhere. Someone up like a maintenance elevator, someone up some staircases. We just kind of went in a corner and hid behind some trash cans, made a little fort out of plywood. And then I'll say about 5-10 minutes later, cops came in. Everyone had their hands up. They all checked us, and now we're here just waiting to see what happens next.
And we're looking at a statement from the UNF president, Dr. Moaz Lamayam, saying our hearts go out to the Florida State University community as they navigate the tragic events at their student union. He talked about how many people have family, friends, and colleagues who attend or work at FSU. I urge you to offer your support and check on them during this difficult time. He also noted, Emily, that he reached out to the FSU president to offer their support. I want to point out Mayor Donna Deegan, we just heard from former Mayor Lenny Curry, Mayor Donna Deegan also tweeted a statement saying, I'm heartbroken to see the tragedy unfolding at FSU today. As an alum who also had a child at Florida State, my heart goes out to the families and students terrorized by this senseless act of violence. I'm continuing to monitor the news out of Tallahassee, and my prayers are with everyone there. That coming from Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan.
And just in the last 13 minutes, Florida A&M University has announced that it is canceling classes as a result of this. I mean, and we already knew, you were saying just a moment ago, Florida State canceled all their home athletic events. But at this point, just to give you an idea of how far-reaching it is, it's because it's just a few minutes away from FSU. So Florida A&M University, just minutes away, announced today that classes and student activities will be canceled for the rest of the day in response to the shootings, and employees have the option to work remotely for the rest of the day as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the athletics. Georgia Tech, our sister station in Atlanta, WSB, reporting that Georgia Tech, the softball team, was actually on the way to Florida State for a game when this shooting happened, and they were scheduled to play Florida State in softball this weekend in Tallahassee. We don't know, the SB is not saying how far away the team had made it from Tallahassee, but they had not arrived on campus, so those students were not on campus at the time of the shooting. But yeah, the Georgia Tech softball team was planning to be there this weekend, and now obviously impacted by this. They're not allowing people on campus. The focus right now is getting people off that campus.
Absolutely. And another statement too, just 3 minutes ago, from Sheriff T.K. Waters, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, says, although we are not in the same city, the Jacksonville community is deeply connected to Florida State University. The men and women of JSO stand with the FSU shooting victims, students, teachers, administrators, and loved ones. This incident of senseless violence, a tragedy for all Floridians, cries out for justice as our law enforcement colleagues conduct their investigation. Our agency stands ready to support and assist. And the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is actually making someone available who is intimately aware of how these operations are handled from the very first moments all the way through, and we'll be hearing from him hopefully as soon as he can get here to the studio to kind of walk us through a little bit of what it is exactly Tallahassee police are dealing with right now.
An update that was posted in the last few minutes on the FSU Facebook page that they continue to shelter in place. The law enforcement was still actively clearing rooms on that main campus. Again, we learned about this around 12:20 or so. They are still actively clearing rooms on the main campus, and they're telling people to continue to shelter in place until law enforcement contacts you. If you need help, they're saying to call 911, or you can call the campus police at 850-644-1234. Also want to acknowledge we have our listeners on 104.5 WOKV who've also been following this coverage. Want to acknowledge them folks who are listening in who may have faculty, loved ones, students on this campus also impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, and Jacksonville is so unique in the sense that we have such a huge community. You know, you're Florida State or you're Florida. I mean, the bulk, I feel like, of our rivalry is Florida State, and so it's such a huge community here. Whether you went there, you cheered for them, or you've got kids that go there, you know someone who is impacted by what's happening on campus right now.
Or even people who went to Tallahassee State or FAMU, people who are just from that college community there in Tallahassee. So we're still efforting to hear from more law enforcement. We've heard from the FBI, Pam Bondi also putting out a statement, and we even heard from President Trump there at the White House, who was aware of the situation and mentioned how they expect to get more information, but the president is aware and will be briefed.
Right, and so for folks who are just joining us here at 311, let us walk you through kind of the timeline. The Associated Press has a great one that's out now, and they got to the scene on campus at 1:42. Of course, this began much earlier in the 12 o'clock hour, but as of 1:45, they said at least 6 people have been hospitalized. At 1:48 p.m., President Trump has been fully briefed. The governor responded at 1:58. Florida State canceled all of their home athletic events about an hour ago. About 15 minutes ago, A&M announced that they canceled classes. But Tanita, you can probably talk more about those first few moments of what we know happened on campus with regards to the shots fired.
Yeah, we heard from different students who were giving their accounts. Some of them described hearing 20 to 40 shots. Someone else described hearing about 12 and then a pause and then 12 to 15 more. We've been playing sound for you of a father who was on campus for a college tour when this all happened, and how they were in the building, and it was about 50 to 70 of them kind of just huddled in place. You talked about that training exercise, which I think is important, that students were warned to expect to hear noise, to see law enforcement, and again, whether that factored into the shooters taking action today will probably, I'm sure, be a part of the investigation. But some students talked about how they opted to just run to their cars and try to get off campus. Others barricaded themselves and hid in whatever area that they were in. So we saw kind of a mix of reactions from people just trying to process what they were hearing in real time. And then, in those moments, you hope that you're going to make the right decision, but you're just doing what you think makes sense at the time to make it out alive. And so we saw the courtyard there with book bags, phones, shoes even, as people ran from that area trying to get away from the shots and the chaos.
And we heard from those students earlier, just a few moments ago, where one of them said he just knocked something over and put a piece of plywood up. I mean, he was just making a makeshift barrier, anything he could do to protect himself. We heard from a Jake Stowe fan who's on his way to Tallahassee now, talked to a young woman who usually works at the student union, who said she knew people who just put a stool over her head, because at that point you're just going to do whatever you can to try and put a barricade between yourself and harm.
Yeah, and we know law enforcement, as they mentioned, they're clearing the main campus, and this is a campus with tens of thousands of people on any given day. And they have a safe word that they're giving to the students as they clear the campus, armed with guns, which is standard protocol, because again, they have to make sure that any threats are neutralized. And we saw that video of the students walking out with their hands up, following those instructions of those officers as they work to just make sure they can get everyone to safety and make sure that everyone on the campus is accounted for.
And we're going to stay on top of this. We're working to get back in touch with Jake Stofian, who again is on his way to Tallahassee, to FSU. He spent quite a bit of time in Tallahassee working there during the first shooting in 2014. Yep, 2014. And can give us a good perspective on that. You already heard from former Mayor Lenny Curry, who's got a son who goes to FSU, is there right now. Luckily, he was able to get in touch with him, and he's safe. But there are plenty of parents, I'm sure, who maybe have not been able to get in touch with their children. And I just, yeah, my heart goes out to everybody who's involved. I mean, it's especially the victims, but even if you're adjacent or you have a kid that goes there, you can only imagine just how your stomach drops.
My stomach dropped when I saw the alerts coming in, and I was like, okay, I wasn't home, and I was like, I got to get home so I can head to work. But I just replayed. We had come to Jacksonville that August, and that November, the shooting at the library at FSU happened that same year. And so to see that something like this happened again, even the shooting that happened at the high school in Texas this week, anytime you see those types of things, you just take that breath. You have that moment where, like you said, you do feel it in your stomach, and your thoughts immediately go to all the people involved and those who are hurt and those whose lives will forever be changed. You mentioned Jake was headed to Tallahassee. He was pulling into the city, getting to the closest vantage point that he can. He's live for us now. And Jake, we can see some activity there behind you.
Yeah, still a lot of police vehicles, even an ambulance really far in the distance if you take a look. So it's unclear whether there could still be people injured on campus or if that's just there as a bit of a precautionary measure. You can see crossing the street, walking around, students kind of slowly trickling off of campus. We're here off of Tennessee Street, just adjacent to the campus near the Westcott entrance. I'm told by TPD that there will be a press briefing here. That is tentatively set for 4:30 p.m. So we'll be sure to bring you any updates and try to confirm some of these details, not only regarding how many shooters were involved in this, but also how many people were injured and whether there were any casualties in terms of people who lost their lives. I know we've been mentioning that this is the second time that FSU has experienced a mass shooting just within the last 10, 11 years. The tragic shooting in 2014 that injured 3 different people. One of those students actually ended up being paralyzed, and of course, as I was mentioning earlier, there was also the hot yoga shooting that took the lives of 3 people, including at least 1 FSU student. So we haven't gotten a chance to talk to any of the students yet. You can see they're kind of on the other side of the street, so that's going to be the next thing we do before we head to where that press briefing is slated and we get our first, detailed description from officials on what transpired here today, what led up to it, what the motive potentially could have been. That may be a little early at this point, but we'll be sure to update you on air and online as we learn all the new information and get new details on this.
I mean, you can see this huge, heavy police presence behind you, and I know you haven't had a lot of time to talk to anybody, but I imagine it's a pretty somber presence there right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you aren't seeing smiles on the faces of any of these students who are walking off campus. People gathered over here in the Starbucks parking lot, seemingly texting family members, I'm sure, letting them know what their status is. Nobody's talking. It's everyone seems pretty upset and distraught by what happened, and it's just horrible.
Some new information coming in. I just saw a tweet from FSU Alert. It says law enforcement has neutralized the threat. Please avoid the student union, Bellamy, HCB classroom building, Rovetta A and B, Moore Auditorium, Shaw Pepper, the Height House, and Caraway, as they are still considered an active crime scene. It goes on to say, I'm opening this up, I apologize. It says that individuals who may have witnessed anything of value should call 850-891-4987. Again, I'll read it again. The FSU Alert. Law enforcement has neutralized the threat. Please avoid the student union, Bellamy, HCB classroom building, Rovetta A and B, Moore Auditorium, Shaw Pepper, the Height House, and Caraway, as they are considered an active crime scene. Individuals are free to move about other areas of the campus. Those who may have witnessed the shooting, witnessed anything of value rather, should call 850-891-4987. That being sent out from the FSU Alert System just here in the last 60 seconds that the threat has been neutralized. So I expect to see some of that activity start to shift on campus in terms of people being able to get out of those buildings and hopefully get in touch with their loved ones. Students have been asked to go to the Donald L. Tucker Civic Center, or folks who are curious about their loved ones, go to the Donald L. Tucker Civic Center to reunite. But again, the threat has been neutralized according to law enforcement there at FSU.
And we'll try and get that phone number up on our screen so that anybody who might be passing along information to folks in Tallahassee who might want that information to call can do so. Is Jake still with us live, or has he gone? Okay, great. Jake, those buildings that you were just talking about, are you familiar with any of these buildings? And I mean, we know what the student union is, but what else was there?
Bellamy, the HCB classroom, the Rovetta, the Moore Auditorium, Shaw, Pepper, any of those sound familiar to you or from your perspective on campus? Because those are still considered an active crime scene.
You know, I wish I could say that I'm super familiar with all of those buildings. I did live here for 5 years, but I didn't go to college here. I ran around a lot, but it's been a couple of years since I've been back on campus. I can tell you we're about 2 blocks away from the student union, so we're pretty close to there. And they obviously have the road blocked off, you know, several blocks down the road. So, you know, it's a very large crime scene, and just based on how many different buildings you're talking about being encompassed in this crime scene, I think really speaks to, you know, how large of an area that, you know, this could have been spreading throughout. I know there's been some suggestion that perhaps there were multiple gunmen, so, you know, perhaps it's not just so isolated to a single building like we've seen in other situations like this. Back in that 2014 shooting, you know, it was just in the library. So this speaks to potentially a much larger type of shooting incident.
We actually have a director, Brian Mendetti, who is an alum, and he mentioned how those buildings are right there in the area near the student union. And we talked about some of that chaos where people were running, and sources telling us that there were potentially 2 gunmen. So, but we're being told that those buildings are kind of all in that concentrated area that they are describing as an active crime scene.
But really, the key thing to take away right now that has just happened is that they have announced that the threat is neutralized. Now, we'll find out what that means more specifically, I'm sure, in the coming moments, hours, as this all unfolds. But that's the critical thing, because now what they've done is they're turning a corner from an active shooter emergency crisis moment that's developing to now this is now an investigation.
Yeah, they can shift into that investigative mode and keeping students away, keeping faculty and people away from those areas. This is because this is a crime scene and they have to preserve evidence that will be critical going forward in this investigation as they work to figure out a motive. We hope to get more information from investigators about who was involved and if they had any ties to the actual college campus.
Well, and the reason they gave a phone number for folks to call who may have seen anything or may know anything is one of the things they're going to do is try to piece together step by step what happened as this unfolded. I mean, we've heard multiple accounts from students. They heard, 15 shots, they heard 40 shots, but what you kind of do is you create a patchwork from everybody's information to put a story together. This is exactly how this unfolded, so that they can, really figure out what went down.
Yeah, who knew what when? A lot of times, once these things emerge and we start to learn more about the suspects involved, then you start getting more information and a better picture maybe about that motive. Want to give that number to you all, and hopefully we can get that up on the screen at some point. This is information from the FSU alerts. That number for individuals who may have witnessed anything of value, they should call 850-891-4987. And again, this is law enforcement asking for information, as Emily said, as they take that investigative turn. That number is 850-891-4987. The number on your screen now is the number that they're telling people to call for information about their loved ones or about the shooting. So two kind of separate things are funneling folks to say, hey, you know, it's hard to get in touch. We even heard former Mayor Lenny Curry talking about it was a bit difficult to get in touch and get information. So the number you see here is for if you want information. Yes. The number I just gave you, the 850-891-4987, is for if you have any information that you need to pass along to law enforcement.
Exactly. And we will be speaking to our very own law enforcement. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is going to be sending someone to help us kind of understand from that perspective what exactly those moments in that crisis were like, or what they do in those moments, to then what happens next, because this is going to be a headline for days or weeks to come as this new information comes out of who did this, why did they do this, how in the world did this happen?
Yeah, and right here as the school year is winding down on a busy day as we approach a holiday weekend, and you talked about so many people who are touched by this in some way. And I'm just even just scanning through Twitter. We're not reporting every single thing we see on Twitter, but so many people who are saying, oh, my sister went there, or my such and such works there, or this person was headed to campus. And it's just amazing to see people who, from all over the country who have these ties or these stories or this connection to the campus.
I mean, it is. It's a huge university. It's an iconic university, especially within the state of Florida. It's well known. And so this is not just a Florida, it's not just a Tallahassee story, it's not just a Florida story. This is a national story, especially, you know, with the police presence that we've seen and that we are seeing as that continues to develop.
I know earlier we were able to get some sound bites of students kind of back to back walking us through kind of what they experienced. Do we have that ready? And if so, are we able to kind of hear from some of those students who were able to kind of get out of the buildings they were in or kind of get to a more isolated place? They were kind of just on standby waiting to figure out what the next steps were. But do we have that sound? If so, let's listen to that now.
About 15 seconds before the actual shooting happened, a bunch of kids started running around screaming. And we're just like, oh, what's going on? And then probably maybe 10 gunshots happened, and everyone's like, oh my God.
I just hear gunshots, and I was like, oh, that's weird, but I didn't realize like how close they were. And I hear more. It was like 5 gunshots in a row, and everybody got up, looked at each other, and just started running.
I just tried to remain calm the entire time. It was kind of surreal what was happening. I didn't really think I'd ever be in a situation like this. You know, you always see this kind of stuff on the news, and you'd be like, how are things like this continue to be allowed and continue to happen? But I never thought I'd be in a classroom in the same kind of scenario.
Nervous, I'm scared for my friends, I'm making sure I'm checking up on them, and I just hope everyone's okay and this gets handled soon. I was parking my car, walking back, and as I was walking back, I see these group of girls crying, really upset, walking back from the student union, told me they heard gunshots, and they just ran and came back to their apartment where I was walking to.
Hearing those different accounts from students. We've also been keeping an eye on the local media there in Tallahassee Democrat doing some excellent reporting there as well. And they noted, as Jake mentioned, we're expecting to hear from law enforcement and officials around 4 or 4:30 in this incident. They're also reporting that the Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare Center there that is mentioning 6 patients, including 1 that's critical and 5 that are serious. That we hope to get more information on the folks who were hurt in all this. And when you have a situation like this with that many people, you know, we've seen from different injuries can vary. Not everyone is always a gunshot victim. Sometimes you can just get hurt in the chaos of trying to escape.
Well, I mean, people were leaving their shoes on the grass and their backpacks, everything you can only imagine. I mean, there's any number of injuries that would be adjacent to or kind of a ripple effect of. People just
trying to get away.
getting out of there. And then, so just to walk you guys through the timeline again, this the shots rang out in the 12 o'clock hour just before about 12:30 is when that first began. It happened right near the student union in a busy lunch hour in the middle of the day. It was beautiful, you know, so you can only imagine the crowd that was there.
Yeah.
And then things began to unfold from there, as you heard students saying they heard multiple gunshots. One saying he heard up to, he said 40, right?
Yeah, 30, about 30 or 40 shots, which lines up. We've heard people say they heard them in bursts. Some of them just describe the total amount. As far as the campus, we know that the athletics that were planned at home through Sunday are canceled. Classes there canceled through tomorrow for sure. FAMU nearby also announcing that they have canceled class for today. Employees there can work remotely as well. And they have students who do they have a partnership with the engineering program at FSU. So they were telling those students that, you know, once they leave FSU's campus, they can't return. So the impact's kind of rippling around the city of Tallahassee.
But then the biggest development when it comes to the shooting itself is that in the last, half hour, Tallahassee police announced that
FSU police.
FSU police announced that the shooter or the threat has been neutralized. So at this point, they will be shifting gears. But in the meantime, the campus is not just back open.
No.
They've said there are at least 5 buildings that they don't want anybody to go to. They're all buildings that are very close to, surrounding, or adjacent to the student union. So their crime scene, where they'll be for, I'm sure, hours and hours, is centralized around the student union, and they don't want anybody anywhere close to that as they start to investigate.
Yeah, and the goal initially was, as you mentioned, making sure that threat was neutralized, but then getting students, faculty, and staff safely off campus and ushering them obviously away from those crime scene areas. We saw video of students waiting to get on a bus. Even some of those students you just heard from talking about how they were just kind of, they were out of the buildings, but they were just kind of standing by waiting for those instructions. In the last 20 minutes or so, we spoke to former Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry, who has a son there. He talked about the moment that his wife reached out to him. He was headed to lunch, and that his wife reached out to him with the text showing the alert about an active shooter, and that she couldn't reach their son. So let's hear from former Mayor Lenny Curry a little bit from our conversation with him.
The first message my son sent me back was, he said, "It's crazy right now. Active shooter on campus. Shots are flying everywhere. Nightmare, not knowing what's happening, having a student on campus."
And thankfully, in his case, he said his son didn't respond to his mom's text, but he had followed him on Snapchat. He was able to reach him there. His son told him he was safe. He was there at his apartment, but still really shaken up at the news of what had happened at his campus. Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan, she also put out a statement on Twitter saying that she was heartbroken to see the tragedy unfolding as an FSU alum and someone who also had a child to attend the university, that her heart goes out to the families of students terrorized by this senseless act of violence, and that she would be continuing to also monitor the news out of Tallahassee, and that she was praying for everyone there too.
And UNF, as you can imagine, the entire Florida University family, because they're so closely tied, is affected by this. UNF sent out a statement as well. We can put up on your screen from the president of UNF, and I can pull it up here in just a minute. It's going to take me a second, but it says, let's see, "Our hearts go out to the Florida State University community as they navigate the tragic events at their student union today. Many of us have family, friends, and colleagues who attend or work at FSU. I urge you to offer your support and check on them during this difficult time. I did reach out to FSU President McCullough to assure him we are here to help with the FSU community in any way that we can. UNF counseling services in the meantime are available for anyone who needs assistance. Student resources are available through the Dean of Students Office. Care services and additional resources for faculty and staff are available through UNF's Employee Assistance Program." And you don't have to be there for that shooting for this to affect you. We were talking about the impact of how mass shootings, school shootings, especially this generation of, I don't want to say kids, but young adults,
They lived through this time and time again.
And you were saying that there are
Parkland students that go to the school, and a father of one of the young ladies who was killed in Parkland talked about that she had friends who were survivors who were there on campus and having to kind of relive this again and the trauma that's associated with that.
Yeah, and Jake Stofan, who is in Tallahassee right now working to talk to students, then will eventually be at that press conference that is set to happen at 4 o'clock. Talked to a young lady who works in the student union who said she had friends who were they put a stool over her head, that people were making makeshift barriers, they were doing whatever they could, because you're scared, you want to keep yourself safe. It's worth bringing up again, I know we've talked about this already, and in a way is a blessing, really, that the Tallahassee Police Department had training planned today. Yesterday, they sent out a press release to people that said, hey, we're going to be on campus. I'm going to try and pull that one up. But they said, we'll be on campus. It's just for training. We just want you to know that the Tactical Apprehension and Control Team, I mean, it couldn't have been a more perfect team to have been there. We'll be conducting a training exercise there. During this training session, you may hear loud bangs, crashes, sirens, and see officers with firearms displayed. And so they were right there.
Yeah, and the question is this something that the suspects took advantage of? Because it's one of those things where you think about, even now, if we were to hear sounds, your brain doesn't necessarily register that you're in the middle of a shooting.
Right.
It takes a moment, especially you're on your college campus in the middle of the day. And so I'm sure that will be a question that law enforcement will be asked or will address, is if this was this training situation where you're told, hey, you'll hear loud pops, or hey, you'll see law enforcement, if they took advantage of this.
Exactly.
Or if this was just an unfortunate set of circumstances. I'm sure those questions will be asked, and very, very valid questions to ask. So many messages online with people just offering their prayers to the FSU campus. You talked about earlier, like a lot of the rivalries, people are saying none of that matters. We're all united right now in this time of tragedy. So we're standing by. We're expecting to hear from law enforcement probably in the next 30 minutes to 1 hour.
Well, you're talking in Tallahassee?
Yes. We're hoping to hear from them in the next 30 minutes to 1 hour. Our Jake Stofan is there on the ground, so we will have our camera there to bring you whatever briefing that we get. But we're also, you've made contact with someone here at JSO to offer us some perspective, especially now that they've shifted from the threat being neutralized to the investigation phase.
Right, that's why I've been looking at my phone. We'll be talking to Lieutenant Scott Ramage. He's a former SWAT officer. He trains active shooter scenarios, and is currently on his way here. We're very grateful for JSO to make him available to talk to us, because he can give us that perspective of, what do you do when you train for this? What do the first moments look like? How, as an officer, do you respond to that? And then, again, as you are turning the corner, as they are now, from an active shooter to an active investigation, what are the things that you need to do to lay the groundwork for a solid case? Because it's a long game. It's not just making sure everyone's safe. That's first and foremost. But then at the end of the day, or end of the year, or however much further down the road, there is a justice component to this, a law enforcement legal component to that.
Yeah, and obviously, and then on a campus with tens of thousands of people working through all those different scenarios to keep people safe while trying to figure out who's who is the threat. I know even after they had the shooting there in 2014, morning anchor Shay Simon, she went to FAMU, and she was mentioning how so many things did change as a result. We see this happen. Something happens in terms of gun violence, and then there might be some kind of security changes, and we've even seen it in our local schools. But she talked about different things changing, IDs being required, or fences, or different protocols, or security measures to harden campuses that were put in place. And those are all things that law enforcement also have to train for and incorporate, and then try to educate people about what to do when these things happen.
Well, I mean, the poster child situation of that is maybe not the right language, but the Parkland did that. I mean, after Parkland and the shooting there, state laws changed. I mean, you were required to have a school resource officer or a police officer on every campus. You know, we saw metal detectors go in on campuses, and I mean, it was a drastic change.
It was.
In direct response to such a terrible tragedy. You know, what do you do on a college campus? It's different, right? You don't have one controlled points of entry as you do with a full school, but certainly events like this are a catalyst for change in communities and with law.
Yeah, and with mindsets as well. And we've also been mentioning, as we've been on air with you throughout this coverage, that mental health component. A lot of the surrounding schools, even UNF, offering counseling services to people who may be impacted by this, and employees, but not just limited to students. People just taking advantage of having someone to talk to, because this is a lot.
I mean, it's important. Yeah,
it is. Even as journalists, us having to consume this and share this information with you and download a lot of this information and details, it's a lot for anybody to kind of process. Especially a lot of us were still coming off of hearing about the school shooting in Texas that just happened a few days ago.
I know.
Wrapping your minds around that happening.
I sit here and think about it, you know, maybe even as early as tonight or tomorrow, the headlines we'll be talking about are announcing the names of the people who were injured or may have died or who were involved, and who they are in those stories. And those are so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, for us who don't even know them, but I can only imagine what the FSU community and especially those families are going through.
Yeah. For
right
sure,
now.
for sure. And families waiting still, some, to hear back. You have some new information?
Yeah,
now.
the University of Florida president sent out a tweet that says, "I join everyone at the University of Florida in sending our most caring thoughts and deepest sympathies to the Florida State University family. Our hearts go out to everyone who has been affected by the shootings and their loved ones." I mean, this is just one of those moments where, you know, Florida State's a rivalry game on Thanksgiving weekend. Who cares?
Nobody.
Who cares if you're orange and blue or you're garnet and gold? Everybody is garnet and gold right now. Everybody. Because a tragedy like this is so far-reaching.
And even, you mentioned that FAMU had their tweet saying stay 850 strong. Just that sense of, like you said, community that we see building and emerging when things like this happen.
And they recognize that this is affecting their students as well, and just
Absolutely.
canceled classes, and we're like, just go home.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emily, let's reset for people who are just joining us. We have been following for now more than 3 hours a shooting that occurred on the campus of Florida State University in Tallahassee, where we have confirmed that there are injuries, people taken to the local hospital there that has a trauma unit in that area. And sources also told us that there were 2 shooters, and that at least one of them was in custody, and that one was dead. And we're standing by to get an update around 4 or 4:30 from officials there, but we've also been hearing from folks and getting reaction from students at that campus.
And the timing of this really began in the heart of the lunch hour at the student union, when you can only imagine how many students and young adults are just milling around, eating lunch, studying, or just taking a break. So just before 12:30 is when the first reports of shots rang out. Students say they heard anywhere from a few shots to up to 30. As you can imagine, it must have been absolutely horrifying and very scary. And there are scenes from campus where, I mean, people they left shoes, cell phones, backpacks, and they just ran. Others who were inside the student union, we've heard from, put a stool over their head or put a piece of plywood up and hid behind it, anything they could to just, in that moment, make sure that they were as safe as they could be. And one of, the other, whether it's just fate, good timing, or a blessing, the Tallahassee Police Department announced that yesterday they announced they had plans to do tactical training today in this area. And they told students and folks to be prepared for, a bunch of officers with guns. And thank goodness they were there. It was not a drill. Today, a drill became reality in the most heartbreaking way.
Yeah, we heard from a guy who said that he saw someone who had been shot in the pelvic area, but that shortly after, someone was there to offer them help. And also the threat has been neutralized. That coming from FSU in the last about 23 minutes ago, they tweeted that, and also the Tallahassee Police Department did also tweet that the campus has been secured and that multiple law enforcement agencies remain on the scene for this ongoing investigation. Also noting that that student union and those surrounding buildings, that area is considered an active crime scene. So they're telling people just to stay away from that area, not to return to that area. They are busing students right now to the reunification point, which is at the Donald L. Tucker Civic Center. And a briefing is set for 4:30. We're going to bring that to you live, and they're also going to have it on the Tallahassee Facebook page. So that's the biggest news that has come out of this in the last few minutes, is that the threat has been neutralized, and they're right now just working to secure that crime scene, which is relatively large there around that student union and those surrounding buildings.
Right, student union, Bellamy, HCB classroom building, Rivetta A and B, the Moore Auditorium, Shaw, Pepper, Hecht House, and Caraway. They, as of 3:20, said when they announced that the neutralized the threat, quote unquote, and that individuals are free to move around other areas of campus, but those are off limits, because at this point, as we've discussed, what has become a developing situation with an active shooter now transitions into an investigation where they try to figure out what happened and why and who, all those serious questions that will take time to answer, but I'm sure everyone is wondering.
Yeah, and with this campus having experienced a shooting back in 2014 there at the library, a lot of differences though. That one happened around midnight, so wasn't as much foot traffic, not a lot of people there at the time, but 3 people were shot, and that gunman was shot and killed in that case, and that did prompt a lot of security changes there at the campus of FSU. But as I said earlier, if you are a faculty member or an employee and you've been there since November of 2020, you've lived through 2 now on that campus.
And there are students that we've spoken to or that we've talked to who lived through Parkland and survived one catastrophic mass shooting, as formative teenagers, to now have to live through something like this in your college years. And that's why the mental health component of this is so important. That's why it's not just FSU who's saying, look, we've got counseling.
Everyone.
I mean, UNF is offering it because you think, oh, it could have been me. When is it going to be the next insert campus school here?
Location, yeah, no, for sure. And you even heard when we interviewed former Mayor Lenny Curry, whose son attends FSU, but he's safe in his apartment. I was kind of trying to take notes, and he described it as inexplicable and a terrible way to be reminded of how fragile life is. And you could just even hear, even though he knew his son was safe, you could just even hear in his voice that he still was a bit unsettled, and especially those agonizing moments when they didn't hear from him and couldn't reach him.
Right. I mean, even it doesn't matter how many minutes it was. That was that many minutes too long. To not know if your child is safe is, I mean, I can't imagine what any of these parents are going through.
We're expecting to get that update, though, from police at 4:30. We're going to continue to stay on air. We have a number up right now on our screen for FSU Counseling Services, 850-644-8255. The school already making those resources available to students as they just kind of navigate this sensitive and really devastating time.
Yeah. In just the last 14 minutes ago, actually, FSU did announce that through their alert system that the lockdown has been lifted. So, we already talked about the active crime scene and where folks are not allowed to go, but otherwise they are free to move around campus, which, I imagine you can offer a collective sigh of relief for that part to be over. And now we begin the long, grueling, excruciating portion of figuring out what is the status of these victims, what happened, who are the suspects, why in the world would you do this, how did this happen?
How did this even come about? Yeah. Jake Stofan is in Tallahassee on the ground. He's going to be shifting over to get to that briefing, but he did talk to another student, so here's some new sound. Let's listen.
My one friend was in the building on the floor in the dark, waiting. Her to like get the all clear. Her doors didn't even lock. They didn't know what was going on. But no, I'm very lucky to have all my friends accounted for and know that everyone's okay.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about parents, but there are thousands of students that are on campus there. You don't keep tabs of everybody at every moment of time. So who knew? Or did you want? Were you in the student union or not? And so I imagine there's quite a bit of scrambling, which is why they have that safe location for everybody to go to as a regroup moment. Like if you are looking for somebody,
That's where you go.
that's where you go.
And they're busing students away from the campus area to the Civic Center. That's what's happening right now. Those are the efforts that have been going on. We had some video of the students getting on the buses. They were standing by, a lot of them on their phones, just kind of waiting in line to get to the buses, to get to that Civic Center site. And when you think about the college experience, I mean, this is something that
This is not it.
this is not what you plan for, and you become family. You know, it's that close-knit experience. Even on a big campus, you have those people. I mean, for her to be able to say she's fortunate that all her friends were accounted for, you know, and being able to hear from them. I mean, I'm relieved for her, but I mean, I just.
How many other group chats still have unanswered texts?
And those are some of the conversations I was seeing on social media, like parents having group chats, the students having group chats, people trying to, you know, like you said, account for everyone and make sure people were safe.
Well, and when we heard from Jake Stofan live earlier when he finally made it there, but first off, I mean, you could see, I won't even call it a ghost town, but there weren't very many people there. It was packed with law enforcement, like all down the road. They had full barricades out. At that point, they hadn't announced that the threat had been neutralized. But over his shoulder at a gas station at a Starbucks, he said there was a group of students who were just huddled together looking at their cell phone, and you can only imagine the stress and anxiety that they were dealing with.
And that's a main thoroughfare there, Tennessee Street, I believe. And to see that without the typical traffic, there's, like you said, Starbucks, there's a lot of activity that happens there on that stretch, and just to see it blocked off with nothing but law enforcement, that's an eerie scene, and that's something that's going to stay with people for some time. We have some sound we're going to play from a parent who was on campus when this happened.
Yeah, it was about noon exactly. That was an hour from when I had gotten home from my class, which was in the EOAS building, or that Ocean and Atmospheric Sciences building, which was right next to the Union. So I had walked on Tennessee Street, the main road, back to my dorm about like 30 minutes prior to that text. And since then, we've just been huddled in my dorm. I've been talking to my suite mates back there who kind of have people they know who work at the hospitals, and they've been giving us information. But so far, all that I've heard from the university is that the active shooter was happening and that we need to shelter in place, but all the other information we've had to get from other people.
So you didn't hear any gunshots necessarily or anything like that told you something was awry? It was the text that came through?
Yeah, I haven't personally heard any gunshots. It must have happened after I got home from my class at around 11:20 or so. But I did hear from people who did hear some things that were around the same area.
Do I understand right that you actually work in the student union?
I do. I work on the third floor. It's the student orgs and involvement office. I've texted everyone who works in that office, and everyone has been evacuated by police. They're all fine. But I very well could have been in the office today.
I mean, how are you processing this? I mean, like you said, you were there 30 minutes prior to presumably this all taking place, and I'm sure you're very concerned about your friends and whether anybody might have been hurt in this.
Thankfully, everyone I've reached out to has been fine, and no one that I know has known anyone who's been impacted by this, or that we've seen videos of and everything. Honestly, for a while, since we didn't know anything, it kind of felt unreal, as it so often does, because you're not seeing anything, no one's giving you any information. But just recently, we've been able to log onto social media and see videos of like people lying bloody on the sidewalk, and it's like there's one video of someone filming, and there's some lady covered in blood, and there's blood on the sidewalk, and that's the same stretch of sidewalk that I take every morning to walk to my job or to my class, and that was very jarring. That made me genuinely very sick to my stomach, and it's a very unfortunate. I don't have the words to express how horrible this is. But personally, thankfully, no one I know has been personally impacted. Everyone I know has either been evacuated from where they were or were very far away to begin with. I did have a friend who was walking to his place of work today. Thankfully, he also didn't work today, so he wasn't already back there, but he was walking also to the Union because there's a Panera Bread in there, and he works at Panera, and people turned him away before they crossed the street and told him to go back home. But yeah, there's a lot of people I know who could have very easily been in the middle of it.
I mean, I know it's maybe cliche, but I mean, did you ever imagine when you went to college this year that you would find yourself in this situation?
Personally, I've never found myself in anything close to this. There have been, in middle school, we had drills, and then we had one actual thing where it's like in the neighborhood nearby, someone had a gun. So we huddled for a couple hours, but I've never gone through anything like this. My friend who works in the Union as well, he mentioned today that he had been through something similar. He'd been in a mall on Mother's Day because he's from Miami. It was in Miami that got shot up. And so to him, it's like, he would have never guessed it would have happened on campus at a university, but he's gone through similar things. It's just a shame.
Madison, are you from Jacksonville originally?
I'm from just south of Jacksonville, Fleming Island.
Oh, okay. That's where I'm from as well. So I think that's how moms got contacted and connected.
Yeah.
Madison, I'm thankful to hear that you're okay and that your friends are okay. You have my phone number. If you hear anything, if you're able to let me know when they get you out of the dorms and you're kind of given the all clear, please let me know, just so I can kind of keep everybody updated and make sure that you're okay and everybody else is okay that you're around.
Good.
I'm gonna let you get back to it. I'm sure that your phone's blowing up with your family and friends and everybody else trying to make sure you're okay. So I'll let you get back to letting them know and keeping them in the loop.
Yeah. Okay. If you're curious, I just wanted to let you know that some people who live in my dorm, they're not allowed to come back right now just because it's so close to the Union. Even though my dorm is like secure, it's fine. Nothing has happened. Yeah. I just wanted to mention that I have friends who were nearby and they can't even get here.
Do you have like a window? Like, have you been able to look out and see anything that's been happening?
I have a window. We've been able to see a lot since we're on the main road. We're the only building off of campus that is like, or on campus that is past like the main Tennessee Street Road. We can see Tennessee Street very clearly. We can actually see the Union. And so we've seen a crap ton of cop cars, and we've heard helicopters because there's helicopter surveillance going on right now. There was somebody sunbathing outside, and I can't open my window, but my suite mates can open their window. So I walked through and I was like, hey, can you tell this person sunbathing like that there's something going on? And she heard, she went back inside, but I'm glad I got to tell her that and everything, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a student that Jake got to talk to as he was driving in Tallahassee. He's on the ground now. He's going to be standing by for that briefing at 4:30. Emily, I want to point out, too, the FSU alert system, they had mentioned that the threat was neutralized. Mm-hmm. They sent out another alert reminding people about those buildings being closed. Right around that Student Union Bellamy, the HCB Classroom, the Rovetta A&B, the Moore Auditorium, Shaw Pepper, the Hecht House, and Caraway. And they're saying, don't come to those buildings to try to get your personal property right now. You're free to move about other areas of the campus, but don't try to go to those buildings at the Student Union, around the Student Union, because that is an active crime scene. So they're telling people, they put out another notice telling people to not try to come to those buildings. And they are also reminding people, if you have witnessed anything of value to investigators, to call 850-891-4987. But just reminding students or faculty, just don't come back to that area to try to get anything, because that's a part of a crime scene. And they have to collect evidence, they have to preserve evidence, and they have to make sure that area is sealed off and not allow access.
And if you think about it, that in an age of cell phone reliance, like that could maybe be why you haven't heard from someone, because it's sitting in a grassy plot somewhere and they can't get back to get it. And that's why it's so important for folks to go to the Civic Center. Mm-hmm. That is where they're telling people to go if you are looking for someone or you need someone, because they have all sorts of services there too. Yeah. But that's a place where, like, look, this is our emergency meeting point. Mm-hmm. If you need to be in touch with somebody, because they may not have their cell phone, and who has, I mean, certainly I don't know any 20-year-olds who by choice would have a landline. So, you know, if you want to get in touch with someone, that's a place to go.
Go to the Civic Center. But again, that active crime scene is have secured the campus, allowing students and people, faculty to move around other areas, but just that focus around the student center where this shooting was concentrated is the area that they're keeping people away from and just asking people to stay away. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there as we prepare to reset with our continuing breaking coverage of this shooting that happened at Florida State University just around lunchtime at the Student Union. A lot unfolding now as we move into the investigation portion of this.
The threat has been neutralized at this point. We are moving into the investigation phase, and in the next half hour, Tallahassee police say they will be speaking to us about 4:30. You can catch that live. Please stay with us with the latest.
Live at 4, Fox 30 Action News Jax begins with breaking news.
People running in fear after a mass shooting on the Florida State University campus.
Scared for my friends and making sure I'm checking up on them, and I just hope everyone's okay.
This is Action News Jax at 4 and continuing coverage of the mass shooting happening at FSU. I'm Emily Turner.
I'm Tanika Hughes.
And let's get you right to the very latest on what we know. There are several victims. We are still working to confirm exact numbers, but Tallahassee Memorial confirmed at least 6 people in the hospital. They say 1 is in critical condition, 5 others are in serious condition. FSU confirmed the threat, however, is neutralized, and police are about to give their first update on this shooting. That should happen at about 4:30. We have a crew on the scene. We will take you there live as soon as that begins.